For introduction, I would like you to just give your name and tell us what your profession, what work you do in terms of mediation, and list some of your experiences.
My name is Maina Migwi, and I'm the founder and CEO of the Suluhu Mediation Center. And the Suluhu Mediation Center is an organization which does mediation. We do mediation. We handle disputes across a different kind of disputes. We have a panel of mediators spread across Kenya and also in the neighboring countries. And this panel of mediators come from different backgrounds and are able to handle different types of disputes. Besides having a panel of mediators, we are also a mediation training institute, and we deliver our training through various modes. We have a self-paced programs where we give access to would-be trainees. We give them access to our platform, and then they can go through the modules on their own, and eventually sit an assessment. So this gives them the flexibility, because they don't have to stick to certain schedules or dates. They do these at their own pace. We also offer virtual classes, and the virtual classes people can join from wherever they are without movement. We also do have weekend virtual classes for those who may not have time during the week. They can train on Saturdays. And then we have physical classes. Besides that, we also offer continuous professional development to those who have already gone through the mediation training. We do also offer outsourced ombuds services to institutions and organizations, where we can embed an ombuds person in their organization to receive complaints confidentially, investigate, give recommendations, and in some instances, mediate. So that's what we do at Suluhu Mediation Center. I've now been mediating for slightly above 10 years. I've mediated in Zambia, where I had a brief stint working there, mostly in labor-related matters, and also family matters, and also locally here in Kenya. I've mediated in labor-related issues for labor unions here, and currently I'm also mediating in our courts and also privately. So in a nutshell, that's Maina Migwi.
Thank you very much. So considering that you are so involved in it, and there's so much teaching going on with regards to labor and family issues, do you think that these have the potential to escalate into bigger conflicts that can then play out in the community?
Yes, those are the areas where I've majorly participated, but you do also tackle community issues which may involve resources, land, and yes, the little conflicts sometimes a conflict may escalate from being a small dispute to involving members of the community, and sometimes this can snowball to pit communities against communities, or individuals within communities against certain groups within certain localities.
So as an African mediator then, do you find that perhaps, in many ways, your approach to mediation is impacted by particular ideals that are implicit to your cultural background? So in other words, you would do mediation differently based on the fact, first, that you're an African mediator, and secondly, because of your cultural background?
Very true. Our culture, our bringing, our background will have an effect in the way we run the mediation process. Majorly because as a mediator, you need to understand the people, you need to understand their culture, their background, the traumas that they've gone through, and this will affect the way you run that mediation process, including the language that you will use, and technically even the skills that you'll put forth to run that mediation process will be affected, or will majorly involve the cultural practices, the way people do things, the way they talk, because you cannot help people to resolve their disputes if you don't understand their ways. So the way you may run a mediation process in the cities will greatly differ with the way you run it in the villages, where the cultural practices are still alive and reflective of the ways that they've lived from the past. So definitely these will affect or will influence the way you'll run that process.
It's interesting that you mentioned the difference between the urban-rural divide. I think very often people who come in from outside don't really take this into consideration. And so, yeah, you think you're going into just Kenya, or you're going into Nairobi, and you don't realize that although Nairobi is one city, there's different aspects to that city and different cultural dimensions to that city, those right in the center and those in the periphery of the city. And so you would have different phenomena at play, and you need to be familiar with the nuances. So when you do a particular mediation, what is your preferred approach to mediation, and what do you prioritize in the mediation process? And do you feel, I mean, you said that, of course, your Africanness impacts, and your cultural background impacts on the mediation approach, but does it also allow for you to bring it forth your own values to the mediation process?
Yeah, when you mention about the cities and the villages, even within the same cities, we have certain demarcations. If you go to the so-called ghettos, the way things happen there and the way they happen in the city proper are different. And yes, there is a space for you to bring out your uniqueness and your style. Because again, people in dispute want someone who is real, someone who is authentic. So if you do not bring, you're not authentic, the disputants will feel it, and they may not trust you. Disputants also want someone who is real, someone who is unique, and these will come out through the way you running that process, the way you are interacting with them. So yes, there is space for one bringing forth their style, their unique way of doing things, and disputants or clients, as we refer to them in mediation, will appreciate that, and it will definitely will have a positive impact in the way that process runs.
So based on this, that you have your own uniqueness, your own approach, your own values, do you then think that these all contribute to whether a mediation process can be successful or not? And do you actually look at a mediation process in terms of success, of it being successful, or in terms of it not being successful? Or is this a different approach? You don't take that approach when you enter a mediation process?
When we talk about the success of mediation, I'm sure different people will have different ways of saying whether a process is successful or not. For me, the essence of mediation is people getting to understand each other. And the feedback that these clients would give to a third party regarding that process, if they're happy that they have been able to understand each other, not necessarily resolving that dispute, because yes, solving the dispute is a success, but for me, the people being able to understand each other, being able to identify their needs, issues, and interests, I think is a first step towards them resolving their dispute. which may not be solved. Sometimes it may not be solved immediately, but as they go through that phase, they will now be able to understand each other better. So the services that a mediator provide to clients, their satisfaction with the way those services were delivered will determine the success of that mediation. The parties may have had clients who were not able to resolve their dispute, but they were happy at least to have spoken to each other and to have understood and acknowledged each other's perspective. And when they're able to understand them, each other, even if they do not have that issue resolved at that moment, then there are high prospect of that dispute being resolved in the near future. So understanding and the satisfaction of clients, for me, that's the success of a mediation process besides the dispute being resolved.
Yeah, so it's not necessarily just that particular end goal, the outcome. It's more important to get a healing kind of a process in terms of the mediation. So based on that, have you been a leader in the mediation processes, a lead mediator in the mediation processes that you've been engaged in? And if yes, then what do you think should be the selection criteria for being a leader in a mediation process?
Yes, I have been a lead mediator in a number of engagements that we have had. And for me, for one to be a lead mediator, the experience of that particular mediator is very key. They need to have the necessary experience to lead. I'm sure not everybody can be a leader. So you need to have that experience and also the necessary qualities to be able to lead a team and to help them harness their energies, their synergies, and work towards a common goal of helping the people who are having differences to resolve those differences or disputes.
Very quickly, if I have to encapsulate what you have just said, and I think about you say that it's necessary to have particular experiences and skills. If you can tell me, do you think it's necessary? Because if you look at most of the track one mediation, okay, that comes from politicians or high profile people, which we honestly have to admit in many ways, you don't think they've had any formal training with regards mediation. Okay, so what kind of an experience are you referring to when you say that mediators must have experience? And do you think they need to have formal training? Does there have to be a certain level of education that encompasses this particular process? And can you name me maybe 2 or 3 skills that a mediator should definitely have?
It's not all mediators who have had formal training in mediation, but then what kind of mediation are they running? If they have to run what we'd call professional mediation, then they need to have professional qualifications, which then can only be gotten through training. When you mention political disputes and mediation, which is normally conducted by politicians and others who may not have had formal training, I think it's important to look at how those mediations are conducted and then make a decision whether those mediations or different forms of negotiations. Because most of the political disputes which have been resolved through the so-called mediation, you'll find that, or rather from experience, not most of them, most of the players entered into the agreements freely. There were other interests and there were decisions which were made not by the players, but from other quarters. So they may be labeled mediation, but then the way they are done is remarkably different from what I understand to be a professional mediation. So because they are running that form of mediation, doesn't need training, because the decisions will be made within and without. So all they need to do is put all those ideas or suggestions or whatever you call them together, and eventually the disputants or the players will ink an agreement, which sometimes they are not happy with, and in future there's a cyclic those issues keep cropping up. So I think the jury is out there if those are really mediation processes or other forms of dispute resolution, which they work, and I definitely respect what they do.
That was a very, very powerful comment. I have never looked at it like that. Thank you. You've just, raised 100 ideas in my mind about that. And yes, it's something that certainly, because it's true, it's a power play. The people who come in, that's why it's high profile individuals. And it's about who has the power and has the charisma to influence and to force people to capitulate, even though they're not happy. And yet a mediation process should be about resolution, long-term sustainability and healing, isn't it?
Yeah, very true. And also the voluntariness of those parties making those decisions. And again, who are making the decisions? We have so many vested interests from foreign powers, businessmen, or whatever you call them. So, well, they'll give it a good label, mediation. But well, in some instances it works. Those levels, maybe that's what will work for that moment. And if it brings peace, then so be it. But again, mediation is about sustainability, the freedom of those, or the self-determination of the players, informed consent, because sometimes decisions will be made, but are those people who are making those decisions are well informed? Have they consulted? All right, are they doing it willingly? So yes, that's a different arena.
Certainly it is. Certainly it is, because it just makes so much sense now that you've spelled it out like that, because one wonders and one keeps saying, why is exactly the terminology used, the cyclical process in it, so that we have peace for a while and then it erupts. We have peace for a while and it erupts. So the real question is it mediation? Okay, now to come to another question. You're a male and you're in a very male-centric environment when it comes to mediation processes. And we know that patriarchy has a strong effect and influence in the African continent and largely across the world. So, but in cases of most conflict situations, do you believe that women can be effective in mediating the situations that you've been in, for instance, or others, even if it's, different, whether it's labor, family, political, large-scale societal conflict? Can women be effective?
Can women mediators be effective in resolving disputes in our African context, which is viewed to be patriarchal in nature? Well, things have really changed, and the patriarchal system is falling into pieces if it has not already done. For instance, when it comes to education, to even for the mediation training that we do at Suluhu Mediation Center, roughly 80%, if not 90% of the trainees are women. Very few men are pursuing further education, and thus this has been left in the hands of women, if I'm to look from my locality. Yes, the patriarchal hang-ons are still there, and in some in some situations, most men will want a man running a mediation process. However, that has really greatly changed, and people are more open-minded. And yes, women are able and are resolving disputes. They have certain qualities which men may lack. They are found to be more compassionate, more empathetic, and this has really helped them to help people resolve in a dispute, their disputes in a way that leaves the parties satisfied. However, there are still pockets of people, individuals who will only be comfortable if there's a man around. Maybe due to cultural practices or the way they've been brought up, they will prefer, even if there's a woman, they'll always prefer that there's a man. But this is rapidly changing, and the people are more acceptable and open to women taking lead roles in helping resolve a dispute. And I think it's only at the very high levels, the so-called political levels, where there are still those hang-ons of the patriarchal way of doing things, because I haven't seen women being appointed to mediate in those big or high-profile disputes or conflicts.
It's interesting that you say this, because I'm just thinking about something now that, to me, in the way in which the local communities embrace the fact that women are capable, have the potential, and like you said, the patriarchy is dismantling. But then at the upper echelons of power, in the political, conflicts, disputes, etc., you have a totally different mindset. And perhaps maybe that shows that there is a disconnect between the people in power and the people who they have power over. And that's why Africa is permanently, or many countries are permanently at conflict, because the people in the positions of power do not actually relate to the people whom they're governing over. And that's why conflict constantly exacerbates.
Very true. And yes, the people in power are yet to resonate with the way things are changing on the ground. And maybe it's because the status quo favors them. So they may want to protect their turf by hanging on to the old ways. But again, with time, that will give way, because you cannot stop a change whose time has come. So it's just a matter of time, though it is slow, because in my belief, if they were given a chance and they have those natural qualities, they would be able to help bring about lasting peace across the continent. Not to say that this means the elimination of men from that arena, but a balance would really bring about lasting peace and bring a halt to the recurrent disputes and conflicts across the continent.
Very, very true. And I think there's much to be learned about. It's a pity that unfortunately when we do stuff like this, it's like we're preaching to the choir. The people who actually should be listening to what is needed perhaps give very little attention to what is being said. But coming to obstacles or challenges, do you typically encounter obstacles and challenges during a mediation process? And if you can maybe name, from anecdotal evidence, what are the obstacles or challenges that you typically encounter, and then how do you overcome these?
Well, yes, there are obstacles, and some of them could be emanating from business interests or a vested interest by third parties who may not necessarily be the actual disputants. And there are also cultural practices which sometimes will come into play, especially in community and family disputes, where certain where progress may not be achieved or realized because of the way people have been brought up, or the way that they may resist the changes which has taken place. Like, for instance, when it comes to succession matters, there's still those people who believe that women should not inherit what their parents' estate. And this is informed by the way they've been brought up, the cultural practices. And in such instances, what I've done to overcome such obstacles is to encourage the disputants to consult, to reach out to their personal advisors, to reach out to lawyers who practice in that area of the dispute, so that they can be brought up to speed in terms of what the law says and the way things have changed. And when they have gone out to consult, then they have gotten to know that the laws have changed, and that, for instance, here in Kenya, even married women can come back home to inherit their parents' estate. And more often than not, not everyone is interested in getting a piece of the estate. Sometimes all they want to do is to be acknowledged as the firstborn, to be acknowledged as belonging to that family, to have access to where they were born. And in a number of cases, the married women would come and they would just want to have access to their mother's house, to their mother's piece of land where they can bring their children, and they show them their roots. So upholding the principle of informed consent in such instances has really helped to overcome such obstacles. We also have parties who may not, who may abuse the process. And when they abuse the process, that again becomes an obstacle to the progress of that engagement. And in such instances, what I'll do is to stop the process, because I won't allow certain parties to do that. If it's within the court, annexed program, I will rope in their lawyers or their advisors and let them know about the consequences of a party abusing the process. And sometimes this has helped to tame those who are abusing the process, taking advantage of it, and simply looking for a way to make the other suffer. We also have issues of power play, and power play in mediations may be an impediment. And to overcome these, as a mediator, I'll come up with the strategies which will help bring about a power balance in that mediation room, including maybe employing shuttle mediation, because some parties will be intimidated being in the presence of others, and also enforcing ground rules, and having separate sessions to help bridge such power divides or power differences.
So these are very obviously there are very many challenges, and you can only begin to overcome them, refine your mediation skills, understand the nuances with the experience, and as you go through each different mediation process. So what we have is that there's a lot of mediation schools, okay, teaching mediation, and ones such as yourself as well. But do you find that in your teaching and then in the choice of mediators that you ultimately, choose to go with you into a particular process, do you have what shall I say, like an internship process where they come in, they sit, they observe, they learn, they watch, and then after that there's a consultation that goes on between you and those whom you are training or mentoring to say, did you notice this, did you notice that, and an opportunity then to document the different nuances, the different tactics, the different approaches? Because in one of the interviews that I did with one of the skilled mediations for him, he was extensively involved in the AU. He said the problem with Africans is that we're not documenting our mediation, and many of the mediators are not writing stuff down. So we feel like there's a dearth of it, or there isn't enough knowledge, etc. It's all there, but it's just not documented. So do you feel that you're doing this, and in a way, are you encouraging the documentation of mediation processes?
Yes, that's a very genuine concern that we do not document staff. Maybe it's because, again, of our culture that we've been brought up and things have always moved down by word of mouth. But again, that now has changed. And there is a lot of efforts to document things. Personally, I'm compiling the mediations I've conducted and trying also to bring out the different styles that I employed in those mediations. And besides that, we've also we have a session, 2 sessions actually every week, Wednesday and Thursday, which we do via Zoom at our center, where mediators congregate every week. We have experienced mediators who are already practicing. We have those who are newly trained, and also who are still going through the training, where they congregate, have discussions, and also do mood mediations or role plays. They're able to get feedback from experienced mediators, and through these assessments, they're able to continuously improve on their skills, to sharpen their skills. We're also encouraging them to make use of technology, not only for practicing, but also for self-development. We are encouraging them to write books, to write articles, and we have WhatsApp groups where we also encourage them to share what they come across, and generally to improve on their skills. Currently, our judiciary is also working, or rather encouraging mediators to earn CPD points. So we are having refreshers, and after every refresher course, we have notes which we compile and share with them. And eventually we are looking at compiling these into books for future reference. And hope, and will definitely work. Will be records of what we've done, the styles that have been employed in various engagements, and we hope that based on the new medias can improve on these, and definitely move these practice to a new level.
This is fascinating, and I think you're the first person I've spoken to who's actually seriously embarking on this, because it says a lot about us. If we do not do this as Africans, we do not do this. We do not set our footprint, both, like you said, orally, the oral tradition, but also in the written tradition, then we will forever be earmarked as a people who didn't have or didn't know or didn't do, and we have to change that particular narrative, because there certainly is a wealth of knowledge in the continent and people with tremendous and phenomenal experiences and wisdoms and nuances that I think many can still take 2 lifetimes to learn. So it's important that it is documented. And when you said CDP, what is that?
Continuous professional development points.
Okay.
I last year was in a task force which was working on a local mediation training manual, because currently most of the curriculums, the manuals we are using for training are not local. They are from wherever. So this project was aimed at standardizing the training that is conducted within our republic. I sat in that committee where we came up with the local manual, mentorship guidelines. We also came up with the continuous professional development guidelines, and these guidelines now are being rolled out. And this year, all mediators who are practicing within the courts are supposed to be earning a number of CPD points for them to continue practicing. So this is encouraging mediators to continuously sharpen their skills. And one of the ways that they will be getting CPD points is maybe by coming up with articles, writing books, mentoring new mediators, attending seminars, attending workshops. So I believe we already on that trend. So we have that manual, which will also be rolled out, and which will be the big concern to say in as far as mediation training is concerned. And I believe this is a resource which can be improved in future, and which can be a reference so that, yes, from our library, we can pick out certain publications, documents, which have been done locally.
This is phenomenal, because this is a contribution to local knowledge and in local experiences, and there's nothing more valuable than that. It's like when I think about the Timbuktu manuscripts, etc. It's recording the local histories of the people, and it's very, very important. So thank you for that. You've really made my day today to know that something wonderful is happening on this level. And then finally, if you take what you learn, experience from a conflict, and you see that certainly this time I did this, it was a similar conflict, but a different outcome. How do you then, learn from those experiences, and how do you take what you learn from a particular experience and use that knowledge to improve future mediation processes? So do you as an individual go home after mediation process and sit down and write down, say, this is what happened, this is what I did, but the outcome was different, so for a future process I need to do something else? Or do you just mentally make a note and then hopefully you draw on it again later on when you come across a similar situation? Like how do you collaborate and put these thoughts together and then use them for future experiences?
Well, yes, I do that. I may not say that I come home and write those experiences, but I use them a lot when we are doing our trainings. We also use narratives drawn from my experiences, of course, observing confidentiality and not giving any disclosing information. And yes, it's also a good idea to put them down, which in the book or the recordings I'm making of the various mediations that I've done, they will come out in that particular book, which I'm also encouraging others to make note of the mediations they go through. So yes, I think I'm also really writing down that because in that book, all that will come out. I've met with a number of people whom, when we've had such discussions, have encouraged me to do that. And it's also something that we are encouraging in our mediation training classes, encouraging people to really develop themselves, develop others. And the only way you can develop others is when you can be able to share with them the knowledge, the experience that you've gone through. And how else can you do it if you are not able to document it? Because you may not be able to talk to everyone all the time.
You know, there is so much wisdom and humility in what you have just said. And that shows that you certainly are an individual who's very much vested in bringing about a sustained outcome in terms of the mediation processes that you do. And seeing that you're so vested in Kenya and this professional development course that you're doing, continuous professional development courses, etc. These are all, to refine the people whom you work with, but the people who help to make your society better. Now, my last question can be a bit tricky. Do you think that the knowledge that you are imparting of the experiences that you are sharing in Kenya can have value to other societies, whether in Africa or even to the global north?
Yes, definitely yes. I may say yes, not only for my local community, because like now through our online training, in the virtual classes, the self-paced classes, we've gotten attention, or we've attracted interest from beyond our borders. And what we are doing here, some of our trainees have gone on to replicate in other countries, in other jurisdictions. And yes, I believe that the experience, the expertise that we are developing over time can be important in even in other jurisdictions, because the mediation we do is so to call it along the international standards, but again having a lot of focus on people also understanding their localities, understanding their people, because as much as we want everything to be international, it still needs to be localized in those areas. So what can be done here in Kenya can be done elsewhere, but again, sensitive to the local conditions, to the local people, to their communities, the way they live, and the way that they've always done things.
Thank you very much for this wonderful insights, Mr. Migwi. It was really fascinating talking to you. And I hope that perhaps when that book is done, the first people you will share it is with us, because I definitely would like to read your book. Or just tell us the title where we can buy it, and we'd like to have it as a resource to access, to show that there is stuff about mediation written by Africans for Africans, and it can be effective. And then secondly, seeing that you do so much training with people who do mediation, can you perhaps give us a name or two of mediators whom we can, further interview to add to this project, to show that there is a depth of knowledge out there? And this is the knowledge that we're trying to bring forth, because our focus is on African mediation from an African perspective. We've always had this where other forms of mediation are imposed on Africans with the idea that Africans don't know how to mediate, or don't have a perspective, or don't have an approach. And we're trying to challenge that. But the more voices we add, the stronger our research is. So if you have any names, I'm sure you do, if you can share with us permission and share with us, please, we'd really appreciate that.
Yeah, definitely I will do that. I really appreciate and I was happy to interview with you, and definitely looking to more engagements as we work on developing and sustaining these practice. There are quite a number of efforts, even locally here. Now we have, we brought together all the mediation trainers in Kenya with the aim of us working together, developing this practice, and also spreading it across our region so that we can work together in improving these improving mediation across the region, so that we don't always need to look beyond the borders in terms of membership to certain organizations in these appropriate dispute resolution field. So we're happy to work with you even in future. I'll definitely be sharing with you names of others who you can have a chat with.
Thank you so much. And there's just one last question which just occurred to me now, is that Kenya had tremendous violence in your previous, a few years ago, well, almost a decade ago, in your elections, you know, and then it was at that time where civil society started to use digital technology to alert people, etc., and to warn about the conflict, to warn about the pockets of violence, etc., things like that. So as a mediator, I know you've spoken a lot about your family in labor, and there are different mediations, but when you're developing these training modules, are you training mediators to come together also in times of political violence, for example, like this, where just before an election or post-election, etc., you know, so to prevent what happened in Kenya those many years ago from happening again?
Mostly what we've done is, or rather what our efforts are geared towards helping people know that there are different ways they can resolve their disputes without necessarily resorting to violence. The political arena is a very fluid arena, so to say, because even that person today who is crying foul, the next election cycle is on the other side, and the others are also now crying foul like he did. So there is also, I think, need to educate the population on so that they can make informed choices even when they are getting, or rather doing the elections. And generally, letting them know what's important to them, and pushing for what they believe in. Because like we noted a while ago, there's what the population below here wants may not necessarily be what is being, the people at the top do not share this, the same vision. And even when there are conflicts, it's the people at the top who are in a conflict, but then pulling the rest of the population, and then we end up with those with the post-election violence, and that kind of thing. But if the people to really be freed from the shackles of always following their leaders, because again, these are some of the ways that we've evolved, where leaders were everything, and but now we have a dispensation where they can be questioned, and they may go beyond and do things. So, and as we are doing these, we are really working on helping people to make informed decisions, to self-determine their future by choosing the leaders who will really push for their interests, as opposed to those who will go for their own personal interests. And when those personal interests are threatened, they may instigate these conflicts to suit their selfish needs or selfish goals. So as mediators, if we can help people to see that they can resolve disputes differently, then ultimately they will refuse to go to fight and demand that people sit down and talk. Like currently we have some sort of a standoff here. And what the people are saying is that we want to continue with our normal lives. And those leaders who have differences, can they sit down and sort out their differences? So I think it's bearing fruit, that people are tired, they do not want to fight. And I think also with the rise of very many women leaders, the women have children, they have families, they want peace. And that also affirms the role of women in terms of bringing about peace. Most families now are single mothers. We have very women in positions of power. We have majority of the women, the mediators in Kenya are women. I think all these and the efforts that various actors are putting in, we'll see things work out differently in terms of those political instigated conflicts concerned. So it's not just the mediators, it's concerted efforts from across the board.
This is really mind-blowing, and I'm fascinated by what you're saying. And I really have to thank you, because you've given me so many wonderful ideas. More importantly, I would like to thank the Kenyan people for taking this lead in terms of mainstreaming the whole notion of mediation amongst yourselves, because once a narrative becomes mainstream, you're right, people change the way in which they see things. And so they change the way in which they respond to conflict and to violence also, because they know there's a better alternative. So it all comes down to knowledge and knowledge production. And that's why what you're writing and what you're doing is also very important, because you need to show there are alternate ways to resolve and like you said, exactly, women want peace. They want, families want peace. They want to live in peace. Everybody wants to live in peace. They want to see their children grow, and so this makes so much of sense. Yes, and I have to say, yay to the woman then. But thank you very much for training the woman, because we have to acknowledge the phenomenal work that you are doing. Mr. Maina, it was a pleasure talking to you. And like I said, let's hope that we can collaborate again.
Thank you very much. And it was a great pleasure. Looking forward to more in the future. Yes. And do have a lovely, lovely weekend.
And you too. Thank you so much again.